Well, hello there.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. So I get a personal demo. When I first read your chat, I was like, oh my God, he's gonna send me a R1. And then I was like, no, that's Zoom probably.
No, I'm not that nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's all good. Um,
um,
so yeah, I saw the launch video with Michael and what was the name?
Skylar was in it, and I believe Marcus. So
Yeah,
Skylar's
Skylar.
VP of marketing, and Marcus is our new manager of product management. Cool guy.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So,
And then I saw a little bit of the chat yesterday with Dan that we get around at work. Shout out to
yep,
Dan.
yep.
Um, so, yeah, I have questions. Um, I had some initial questions right off the bat that I posted on the iGuide forum. Did you
Oh,
happen to
did
see
you?
those?
Good, good. I did not.
Okay. Well, can I just throw them at you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I'm easy.
So the biggest thing for me was did the lidar improve at all from the Planix Pro?
Yes, in terms of usability. So the LiDAR and the concept or method by which it's used, or the process it uses to collect data, nothing has changed in that regard. So it is a 2D LiDAR that is going to create what we call like a cut plane, which is essentially like a horizontal strip of measurements in 360 degrees. Is exactly what the new camera creates, and it's exactly what the old camera created, and it's exactly what the previous old camera created, and then go back to
Yeah.
3 or 4 generations, and it's all the same thing. There's just different ways to get it, and slightly different technologies used to combine that with images. And there's a good reason behind that. Would you like to hear it?
You'd like to hear it? Here it goes.
Can you imagine if you said no? I'd be like, all right, we're done. Thanks. Good job.
Well,
So,
yeah,
so
go for it.
the way that iGuide technology works is that it captures things in a way that is extremely translatable into floor plans. So what I mean by that is that 3D data is awesome. No one's going to say no to that. But 3D data is not required to make extremely accurate floor plans that are, that have integrated visuals. Obviously, there's floor plans and then like the 3D tours resulting from that. But
Yeah.
the 3D LiDAR, or sorry, 3D data from a LiDAR device or any type of scanner is not required to make an iGuide. So the principle behind this camera is not to capture 3D data. That's cool. Other cameras do that. The whole point of the new camera is to do what it does or what previous generations did, but do it better, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. So the 2D aspect, it's still there. But what's been improved is the usability. So that's just how you capture that data using the system. And then also, yeah, you probably saw in the event, the image resolution is much higher.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's nice to have. Everybody likes high resolution images. No complaints there. Did that make any sense, what I just said?
Yeah, totally. I have follow-up questions though. Um,
Okay,
so I
go
guess
for it.
I'll jump into well, let's keep on the lidar. So yeah, if it can do an accurate floor plan a lot more efficiently or quicker, that's totally fine. But I was thinking about cases where you have like steps, maybe just one step or a curb or a pedestrian ramp, something like ADA compliant. Um, that 3D data would help, I would think. Um,
It could under certain circumstances, but it's not required. So interestingly, iGuide and its technology doesn't really get credit for the amount of data and the way it's collected. It doesn't get the credit it should. There you go.
okay.
We're underappreciated. There you go. And the reason I say that is that it's easy to understand, I think, like a LiDAR in a horizontal plane. It's a bunch of dots. You look at it, it looks a bit like an outline of a space. Okay.
Right.
And I think it's easy for most people now, anyway, to understand a 360-degree image. But the real magic of iGuide, and the reason this camera uses the exact same method as previous cameras, is that there's way more data there than you think.
Mm,
The 360-degree image itself could be used through triangulation or photogrammetry to understand a 3D space. We
Right.
don't do that, but you could. So the image data alone is enough if you really wanted to use it. And the same goes for LiDAR. If you really wanted to, you could take the LiDAR and you could capture in 3D. If you take the LiDAR and the 360 image and you combine them, what it does is it gives you the best of both worlds. You have not only triangulation, but you also have the accuracy of LiDAR. And they can be used in this really magical way. This is the magical essence of the iGuide. A draftsperson physically loads up the data on a screen and they look at it and they see a bunch of dots that represent a wall. And so that's enough to draw a wall. You just need 2 points and you draw,
Yeah.
you can hit them, right? But what they do is they look at that wall and then they look at the image, the 360 image, and they go, oh, okay, that's a wall. And then if there's anything that deviates from that line, they look at the image and they can understand like what it is. Is it a bookshelf or a plant or curtains or whatever?
Yeah.
It also allows them to position not only in the data, but in the image things like windows, where they're placed on a wall, and identify other details and other structures so that they can draw it in. And in terms of elevation, they can use the relative positions of scans and the LiDAR data to determine heights. So we can determine ceiling height very easily. It's all in the image data. So we actually have plenty of vertical data, but you wouldn't really know that
Yeah.
unless you sort of saw them work or you saw their process. So just explaining it is kind of like the best thing I can do. But
Super helpful
so,
though to explain it, because I would have thought you're taking maybe a 4 foot high or 5 foot high little crosscut of a wall and not getting anything below that. So if you had to step up or whatever it is, how would you see that? So
well,
that's
that's the really interesting thing. So you can actually see how they do it in the iGuide tour itself. So there are 3 different measure modes. There's measure mode 1, where you draw a little line on the floor plan. That's pretty easy. But then there's measure modes 2 and 3, where you can measure by defining a plane, or you can measure using multiple scan positions. And that's how they do it. And they can define all sorts of stuff, cupboards and uppers and lowers and islands and
yeah.
any fixture that they would typically draw in. Because the output is almost always, with a couple exceptions, a 2D file, it's more than enough data to
Yeah.
determine what appears on what level. And the verticality doesn't get factored into it until like later when we're doing 3D CAD models and stuff, where there is some vertical scanning required occasionally.
Um, Next question with regards to the imagery, the new camera is 60 megapixels
Hmm.
with a half-inch sensor, and the old camera was 24-ish, maybe megapixels
Between 20 and 24, yeah. I
with a
think
1 inch
23,
sensor.
0.6 or something.
Yeah, yeah. So it had a 1 inch sensor. So just the photography in me is thinking, okay, smaller sensor, worse in low light conditions. How do you get over that?
That's a good point, and it is 100% true. So to compensate for that, some extra features have been added to the interface when you're shooting. So the shoot controls that allow you to to specifically compensate for that, that allow you to do noise reduction.
Okay.
And it's really cool. So what happens is that you have the choice of enabling low, medium, or high noise reduction at the expense of speed. The camera will just shoot slower, because what it's essentially doing is shooting multiple images and then combining them to reduce noise. It's very effective. The images look fantastic when this method is done. So it's not done in post, is what I'm saying. It's done
Yeah.
while you're shooting with actual real data, which is the best way. And the images that come out of this camera can look better than the comparable Z1 images. So out of the Theta X versus the Z1, or out of the Planix R1 versus the Planix Pro, with no compromise in shoot time.
Okay.
So it's just as fast, even with noise reduction. But wait, there's more. We actually gave you the ability. Yeah, I've been saving that. I'm going to do it again later too, because I got a few of those. We gave you the ability to jack it up as high as you want. So if you want to really smooth it out, we not only give you like low, which is good enough, we give you medium and high, which averages even more images. And so the maximum shoot time might be like, I don't know, 20 seconds or something. So at the expense of time, you can take more images. And there are times where you're going to want to shoot with this camera dynamically. So not everybody wants this. Some people will just want to turnkey, like just set it. I don't want to think
Yeah.
about it, push a button. And that's great. That's you can totally do that. But for other people who want to approach it maybe more like their regular photography, where it's a bit more dynamic, and they're willing to critically look at a room and say, okay, this is important. and I can see some really light areas and some really dark areas, and there's a potential for noise here, and I could really use noise reduction. Okay, then you could turn it up and take an extra 10 seconds to make the images look a little bit smoother. And then do the opposite when the situation is less critical. So obviously a big part of shooting an iGuide is measurement. So if you were measuring like a closet or an attached bedroom where they've dumped all the stuff and it's like, don't shoot that, but you have to shoot it for measurement. Well, then turn it all the way down and shoot that room in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So this camera's cool. Everybody wants to know, is it faster? The answer is yeah, but it can also be slower. It's more dynamic. You can go from 3 seconds all the way up to 18 seconds if you really want to, or 16 seconds by changing the settings. So it's like a regular camera in the sense that
Yeah.
you can change the settings to meet the needs of the environment that you're shooting and the needs of your clients. Yeah.
Well, you just kicked off about 10 more questions I had.
Oh boy.
Well, look at my watch. So yeah, you starting with the IMS5, I would turn off I think it was turn off HDR. I would switch the mode,
Yep.
right? When I was doing closets or garages, somewhere that I didn't need that photographic data, but just the LiDAR data, I would turn it off. And the Planix Pro, is so fast that it's whatever. Do you have a timing comparison on like just an average house with the Planix Pro versus the R1 as far as per capture seconds? Not like capturing the whole house, but like each panel.
So I can tell you scan time very precisely because we've measured it. I'm sick of measuring it at this point. I'll be honest with you. So I'll tell you that in a second, but
Okay.
I'm gonna wrapper that in some explanation about sort of, so you're gonna get context. I apologize
Yeah, no
about kind
worries.
of where the industry is going. So in terms of the common questions that people ask about any of these technologies, like, oh, how long does it take to shoot a house? I think we've grown up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't think, not me personally, but like, the industry. But I think I'm glad you laughed. That was at my expense.
Yeah.
So the idea that you could tell someone how quick it is to shoot a house with no like
It's too
no,
too open ended.
it's too wild. Like every environment is different, every house is different, every
Totally.
person is different. And what
Yeah.
we found is that it's just not an effective way of describing anything because it's silly. So I'll tell you the how long it takes to scan, and then I'll kind of break down the math real quick and give you a sense of kind of how long it would take under ideal conditions and if you follow sort of like a process. So
Yeah.
more or less, if you turn all the settings on the camera to like just as low as they can go, the fastest you can shoot is about 2.5 seconds. Now, bear in mind, every scan requires that the camera like essentially meter for the environment. So it's going to determine how much light there is, and then it's
Yeah.
going to change the exposure time. There's no shutter in a theta, but you know what I mean? It's going to change the exposure time to compensate for that. So all these numbers are based off of just like our testing environment, which is just kind of like a dingy like basement.
And
Probably this one, to be
and
honest.
Usain Bolt running it because literally
Sometimes,
running it because 2.5 seconds or like
well, so
you
that's
can't
two
get
and a
out
half
of the way
seconds.
fast enough.
Well, so I'll describe exactly what 2.5 seconds does. So 2.5 seconds is, or what first do rather, because this is the nuance that we all kind of skip, which is funny.
Yeah.
If you're standing next to the camera, you have the interface on your smartphone open, the camera's running, like, you've parked, you've talked to people, everything's in its place. Like there's a lot that has to happen before you can do
Yeah.
this. And you push a button, you have to wait 2 to 3 seconds, depending on the ambient light, for the camera to show you a preview and be ready to shoot again. So
Incredibly
it's pretty
fast.
good. Just boop,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's pretty comparable to really, really low settings on any 360 camera. They don't take that long. That's pretty common.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that it's not only capturing LiDAR, but also attaching that data to previous data and tracking you the whole time in the space, that's pretty cool. 2.5 seconds, that's all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's going to go up from there. So, I'll give you the scan times and we'll talk about the real world. But if you turn on HDR, you're going to add a couple more seconds, about 5 seconds. Any type of HDR only adds 1 or 2 seconds. That's
Okay.
actually not the limiting factor for Planix R1. Adding noise reduction is going to add approximately 4 seconds per setting. So that means you've gone from maybe 4 seconds to say 8 seconds if you have noise reduction on low. 8 seconds is a perfectly acceptable wait time, by the way.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, up to 10 to 12 seconds when you add noise reduction medium. And then in the sort of 14-ish, 14, 15 seconds when you have it on high. So maxed out, you're looking at like 14 to 16 seconds.
Okay.
But because Planix R1 and Planix Pro have the ability to do two-shot mode, if you're in an environment where you want to walk from one side of the camera to the other rather
Yeah.
than hide, you can use the two-shot mode and it will double it.
Okay.
So in the real world, to your point, yeah, like you have to hide, you can't just push the button constantly, right?
Which was a
So
huge plus for the IMS5.
isn't that funny how
I
we've
could
moved
have,
so far forward?
but I still like that feature to be able to be behind the camera, rotate it, hit the button, rotate it. I can do that
Yeah.
pretty quick, almost as quick as me with the Planix Pro, putting it down and then trying to find a wall to hide behind,
Yeah.
or switching the two-shot mode. I'm almost as quick with the
Okay.
IMS5.
I'm writing that down in my feedback notes from customer feedback. Would like to hide in Planix R1's blind spot while shooting. Okay.
They should,
Um,
some AI or something that can remove us out of shape, not model looking operators.
you never know. Some clever person might figure that out one day. It's
Yeah,
possible.
yeah,
Anything's possible.
yeah. Um,
Um, but yeah, well, okay. So sorry, I lost my
you
train of
notice.
thought there because I was like winking too hard. So basically, what happens is that you've got two options. You can either run and hide and then press the button, and then obviously run back once it's done, or you can do the two-shot mode. And either one of those things, on average, is going to round out to about somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds per scan. That's a very common number. Now,
Yeah,
that is provided that there is nothing in your way,
yeah,
that there's an obvious place to hide,
yeah,
that, like it's perfect scenario. So if you think about ideal shooting conditions being approximately 1 to 2 scans per minute, then you're in a very comfortable zone for most people.
yeah,
That's what most people can shoot. That's not what they actually shoot. That's what they can shoot.
yeah,
Because what most people do, we've looked at the user data and we watched people for years, and they shoot and then they stop and they do things and they check stuff and they use their phone and then they keep shooting again. There's lots of starts and stops,
take lunch.
and and so to go for lunch, yeah. So that's super common. So we know that. So the goal with this camera in terms of speed is to make sure that it's not super fast, because at some point there's diminishing returns, is to make sure that it's transparent.
Yeah,
Give you the opportunity to do whatever you need to do and let the camera get out of your way. So it just needs to be fast enough to
yeah,
be something that doesn't, you're not fussed about. There's obviously conditions you have to go hide and you have to run around the camera
yeah,
to do
yeah,
two-shot mode, but the goal is to make that 2 scans a minute 100% possible under ideal conditions, and then the rest of it, I mean, that's up to you, right? It's the conditions at the property, it's the people who are there, it's the like what shoes are you wearing that day,
right,
that kind of stuff.
right.
That'll determine your speed. And if you want to do the math, this is what we use for math. We say 2 scans per minute is about max for again most people under ideal conditions, and there's going to be some travel time in between. Big properties, small properties, it's about 10-ish seconds between scans. So if you do it like this, it's almost like blocks of 20, then 10, then 20, then 10,
Yeah,
which works out to about a minute for 2 scans. So it's 20 seconds to scan, 10 seconds to walk, pop the camera down, another 20 seconds to scan, 10 to walk. If you do that math, 2 scans per minute, you're going to look at the average house taking, if we're talking about 3,000 square feet, a certain amount of time per number of scans. And this is where it just gets weird, right? It's like, well, how many scans do you need in a,
well, every
a
house is different.
3,000 square foot? It's right. So this is where it all
Occupied
kind of
house
falls apart.
with furniture is different than a vacant house with no furniture. And
Yeah. And then some houses are just more complicated. They have more little rooms and each
yeah,
of them needs a scan. Some houses are open concept, but I can give you a range, which is kind of fun. So a 3,000 square foot house, more or less, is going to require somewhere between, this is a weird range, but it is what it is, between 15 and sort of 45 scans in that zone. And the reason the range is so weirdly broad is that there are lots and lots of different ways to capture a tour, and it depends on
Yeah.
what you want.
Yeah.
If you're doing just floor plans and the visuals are throwaway, what are the extra scans for? Just scan
Right.
one scan per space, you're done. So that's minimum. So the number of rooms in a house, you don't have to worry about visual navigation through walls. You don't have
Yeah.
to worry about cleaning
Yeah.
stuff up. Like you're gonna fly. You don't need very many scans. You can finish that house at like you could move max speed and finish it as quickly as possible. But then some people want a tour that's more navigable visually and is more of an experience. So that means the living room can't have just one scan. It needs like one over here by these two chairs, and
Right.
it needs one in the middle
Yeah.
of the great room with the stupid live edge coffee table, and it needs one over here by the desk zone with the vases of twigs and the books artfully displayed or whatever.
Yeah.
So that means that realistically, this process should take you about, again, 2 scans per minute, but an average home in the 3,000 square foot size should take anywhere from basically 10 to sort of 25 minutes in the real world. But wait, there's more. I'm just going to keep doing it because I got a lot of this. Some people are just really, really talented, you know, just maybe even us, who knows?
Yeah.
And they can dynamically adjust to things just faster. I'm old, I'm not that talented anymore. But when I was young, maybe I could have done this. You can switch between settings and you can move faster or slower depending on what you choose. So that means that you take more time in spaces that matter. Again, jack up the noise reduction, and you take
Yeah.
less time in spaces that don't. That's unfinished basements and I don't know, closets and junk like that. So using that, you can go a little faster, and then understanding what you're capturing is critical for all capture technologies. This isn't just iGuide. This is an underappreciated aspect of virtual tour creation. Putting scans in the correct locations is one of the few variables you have total control over.
Yeah.
No technology can tell you, well, exactly where to put it. They can
Yeah.
warn you that you've gone too far, but but
That's an art
basically,
form.
it is. It's interesting too because it represents a perspective. Every scan position, regardless of technology, but certainly with
Yeah.
iGuide, represents a place where someone might stand to then obviously view that property, understand it, measure it, whatever. So that means that getting those to be efficient, as in they should be in places where people care, and putting them in places that affect that navigation and getting the most out of the least number of scans
Yeah.
takes time, takes practice. Some people never get it. Some people, again, talented, they just do it. That can dramatically reduce shoot times by eliminating over coverage, like just shooting way too many scans. So that means that there are people out there, they're unicorns, who shoot like 3 scans a minute and they can just do that. But
Yeah.
those people are like, they're awesome, but they're quite rare. But the goal of the technology is to let those people do their thing. If they want to do that, they go right ahead. And so it's professional like results. Like there's no compromises here. It's just, the exact same tools, the exact same results, but they can move at that speed. So the goal of this camera was again to be transparent, but just so that you could worry about the stuff that's important to you. So if that's talking with customers because it buys you that extra time, okay, sure. If that's rearranging furniture because that's your thing, okay, that's cool too. If it's
Right.
giving you extra time to shoot whatever other stuff you're doing, video, drone, anything, walkthrough videos
Yeah.
or whatever, gives you that time back. Or if it's trying to make a better tour, this is the important one. The better tour, it gives you that time back too. So most people just want to be done faster, but then some people are like, well, I don't have another shoot until 4. Why don't I kind of make this better?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this camera is supposed to open that up, give you that time and the ability, should you want to do it, to really master it and really shoot something that is like better than what you would have shot if you didn't have that time.
Yeah.
That make any sense?
Totally. Totally. Just going into HDR real quick. Are
Mhm.
you doing, is it doing 3 brackets, 5 brackets? What's the HDR settings like?
So it's very similar to previous versions of iGuide HDR. So yes, it is bracketed, and there's 3 settings now that actually mirror settings in the IMS5 and the Planix Pro. They're the most used settings. So those are the ones everybody wanted. That's what we gave you. So it's off, and then the brackets are -1, +1. That's just a light. That's a dash of HDR, but people like it, so that's cool. Then there's +3, -3, super standard HDR setting. Bring up the shadows, bring down the highlights, and then there's the more aggressive, particular to iGuide, -5, +2, which is a little easier on the shadows, so you don't lose as much contrast, and then really aggressive on the windows. And what we've noticed over the years is that that's like what most people gravitate to. Doesn't mean that's what you have to do, but that's what a
Yeah.
lot of people like. They're like, I want those windows. I want as many highlight details as I can get. And I
Yeah.
want you to bring up the shadows a little bit because if you bring them up too much, I see too many things under the couch. And so that's,
So how many
the setting
pictures
that.
is it taking to blend that together?
So basically, the theta is doing all the processing. It's my understanding that it is indeed taking 3 images,
Okay.
but how it's doing it is a bit magical. I don't know
Okay.
anymore. It's not as simple as the olden times where you had the DSLR that was literally clicking through the exposures and you could just
Yeah.
hear them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's all occurring in the theta X now.
Um, so before we get on to the really interesting one I wanted to ask about, I'm going to ask about,
Yeah, this was
I
all just lead up.
yeah, got a peak somewhere. Um, I haven't really used the app too much. I think I made a
Yeah.
video on it. Um, Maybe I didn't make a video. I've
Oh,
definitely
the mobile
downloaded
app,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I still use the web interface. Can the R1 use the web interface is my first question. And then the second question is there any advantage to using the app for the Planix Pro or the R1 over using the web interface?
So that's a really, really great question, especially if you're an existing iGuide user, because it's a bit of a mental shift. You have to kind of relearn things, even though the interface is nearly identical, which is
Yeah.
funny. So what we've done is we've done our best to make the experience with previous generation cameras, or sorry, I should say our newest generation camera, the Planix R1, match the previous generation cameras. But under the hood, they are completely different. So it's a bit of a I don't know how to describe it, but we're basically covering up the fact that we're doing things differently by just using the same AI.
Yeah.
So there are advantages to both, but there are very clear reasons why the decision was made to switch to the app. So just right off the top, the Planix R1 requires that you use the mobile app for iOS or Android. There is
Okay.
no web interface anymore. And that, like, I miss it, to be honest. It was easy. You could log in so fast. But that was very much an enthusiast kind of implementation of an app. It's so fast, it's so cool, but it's kind of nerdy and it's really not for everybody. So when the app was introduced for Planet, yeah, we're nerds. We should just
Yeah.
admit it. It's fine. When Planix Pro, so when we first introduced our app early this year for Planix Pro, what it did it is it just accessed that web app. And so if you load it up now, you'll see, oh, it's just loading the web app. So that's all it's doing. It's creating a wrapper and an experience that improves the camera connection process for most people. So that's the part where you have to like get your camera out, turn it on, connect to it. For you and me, that's easy, but for a lot of people, that's really hard. So we tried to make that easier. The new, but really everything was being done on the camera. All the data was being stored there. The whole thing was being loaded off the camera in your browser.
Right.
The new camera doesn't work like that. It's occurring on your smart device. And as a side effect or as an intentional effect, all of the data that's stored when the camera is being run is stored on your smart device, which was a very intentional decision. So I'll just be frank and honest. The downside about that, with that, for existing users, is that if you, for some reason, had a catastrophic malfunction with your smart device while you were shooting, well, that sucked, but it wasn't really a big deal because all the data was on your camera. So all you had to do was grab any other device and you could just start where you left off and keep going.
Right.
So that, unfortunately, is no longer the case. And I missed that already. But I have actually never had a catastrophic failure of a smart device. So, and I've shot, oh my God,
Lot.
thousands of, I have dropped my phone and smashed it, but I actually still did the shoot with it. It was fine. It was just
Yeah.
gross. But what we found was that the advantages far outweigh the loss.
Yeah.
So there are some advantages to having the data on your smart device. One is that this is just your USB drive now. All the data is just on here. And so you kind of always have this with you already, so you can't forget it. That's a big deal. People forget the USB drives all the time. It's in their
Yeah.
computer. So that's kind of cool, a quality of life bonus there. But also when you get home, you don't have to go get the camera, pull it open, take the drive out, plug it in. Like you can skip all that. You can either wirelessly transfer it from your phone to your computer, or you can just plug it in or whatever you want. So that's pretty easy. The other benefit is that because the data is on your smart device, it's already processed. So that skips a step. It used to be that you had to bring it into Stitch or sort of export it from the camera. And that was a several minute long process. You don't need to do that anymore. It's all just
Hmm.
done already. And so while you're walking around, there's this like hidden benefit. thing that nobody can see, but is very cool. It's processing all your data as you're capturing. So just like previous iGuide cameras, we're not wasting that time. So when we talked about speed and like what's happening, we're using that time that you're taking in between one scan and the next.
Yeah.
Because we know that people don't, it's not magic. You don't just teleport to another location. There is a lag there. We use that time to process the data so that when you get home, that's it. It's there.
Well, I
Um,
got more questions.
I'm just giving you so much to think
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
We're gonna
So,
have like
okay,
8 of these calls and we won't even get through it all.
this is
Um,
a quick one. Is the app available for tablets,
it is. Yep. Tablets, phones,
iOS and
anything
Android?
you want.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Yep.
That's an easy
There's
one.
no limitations there. As I get older, I find smaller screens are getting more and more distant from my face, and a tablet would be quite welcome.
No,
So,
yeah, I have a iPad Pro 12 and a half inch or 12.9 inch.
yep. And
Decent
so
job.
that's, yep, 100% going to be usable. Yes. So
It,
the other, sorry, were you gonna ask a question
well,
again?
just with regards to it being stored on the device, that brought up a couple questions. One,
Mhm.
I have photographers who shoot for me, and
Yeah.
so the process is whenever they're done shooting, they'll stitch it, but they'll provide me with the actual folder plus
Yeah.
the export folder. So the folder, all the panels, everything, all the raw data, I guess is what you would call it.
Yeah.
Can we export that raw folder structure from our device? And
Oh,
then
you bet
how?
you can.
Okay.
Okay, I don't want to get too excited, but I'm a big like file system nerd, and so
Yeah.
I love having control. Like I make big, stupid file systems and all everything's sequentially numbered and it's all
So,
perfect.
yeah. So,
So this
same.
was like made for people like me. You don't have to do any of this, by the way. You can skip it all and just submit straight from your phone as well. But if you're like me and you like managing data, or like you and you have a need to have that project getting moved around, you just have access to it on your smart device. It's like in your files. So that means that you can do really weird stuff. You can connect an SSD to your phone and transfer it over and hand someone the SSD.
Okay.
Like that's it's kind of like video in that sense. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Often to bypass phone storage limitations, you'll just constantly be moving data off it. It's just like that. If you want to take that and plug a USB drive in and copy that data off, just like this was a USB drive, yeah, for sure. It's
Okay.
easier going from one system to another in some cases. Like going from an iPhone to a Mac is pretty easy. Going from an iPhone to PC is actually still pretty easy. I think Android to Mac is a little weird, but again, it's just a
Yeah.
USB cable. You have to figure it out. But you can also use any wireless system, any cloud system, anything you want to move the data off of a phone. Again, it's just a file system. So if
Okay.
you want to airdrop it to your Mac, yep, go right ahead. If you
Okay.
want to transfer it directly to a staging area like Google Drive, yep, go ahead. Dropbox, anything you like. So
Yeah.
it's very, very flexible, and it's only limited by your phone hardware and the software availability. Obviously, this stuff isn't always free, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of what you have access to or what you want to implement, but you can send the data from a smartphone to other locations in a million different ways. So, and this supports that. You have access to the files just like you do with all other iGuide cameras.
Okay. Um, so I have let's talk about Slam, and then I have a feature request since I got you here.
Okay. Since
Hopefully,
we're recording this, I'll be nice and I'll pretend to write it
hopefully
down. It's
somebody
fine.
will see it. So Slam. Uh, I've been familiar with Slam, and I kind of remember, didn't the IMS5 have some sort of feature where you could
It did, yeah.
pre
It
pre
was interesting. It did work, and a lot of people really, really liked it. But the way IMS5 worked, the way its SLAM implementation worked, is that you took the camera and you either turned the SLAM on. It was
yeah,
called auto tracking, but you turned it on, and as you walked around, it would build a map. And upon that map, it would place data. So instead of being like these discrete chunks of data that get kind of put together like a puzzle, it was like it kind of built like a puzzle outline and then it kind of slotted them in. And
yeah,
it worked, but it was confusing and it gave people this idea that they needed to capture this thing. But it was like optional, it's purely optional, it was just there for alignment. So we learned a lot from that, a lot. And when Planix Pro was created, we understood far better how people work with data. And what we tried to do was solve the problem. The problem is not necessarily in the data collection process. It's in coverage and alignment. So nobody can tell you where to put your camera. You need to tell the camera where to go so you can
Right.
capture what you need. And so the best job any technology can do, and this works for all capture processes, is just show you what you got so that you can make that decision at the end of a shoot. Like, did I get it all? Can I go home? And that for Planix Pro, that was auto alignment. We tried to make the data as clear and simple as possible
Yeah.
while still being like an obvious kind of top-down look at the property, but then give you the sense that as you capture, it's going to, connect itself. And then if it doesn't connect itself, maybe there's a little warning or whatever. And,
Yeah.
to varying degrees of success, we did achieve that. And then progress on to R1, and we from Planix Pro learned something else. And what we learned is that people are different. There's lots of different people out there.
You
It's
don't say.
just wild, right?
Yeah.
It's embarrassing that it took us so long. But because we've worked with people and this LiDAR data for so long, what we saw was this recurring pattern that happens over and over. Some people look at that data, they take their smartphone and they look at it and they're just full of confidence. They're like, I understand that. That's the living room. That's the dining room. That's the kitchen. There's a window. That's a plant. Like they just get it. Other people look at that data and are horrified and are like, I don't know what this is. What are you showing me here? Is this spaghetti? And so there's lots of different ways to help people understand what the data is so that they can get that adequate coverage. Because at the end of the day, if you want to have a successful scanning technology, you need to be able to give people the tools to go out and like get what they need.
Right.
So we thought, okay, cool. What can we do here? And so one of the really interesting things about the data is that that slam provides like motion, and it provides this really interesting way of interpreting the data. So imagine for a moment that you see a map. Maybe that map's even on your phone, and maybe there's something on that map that represents you. As that thing moves, people are already conditioned to go, oh, I get it. That's me. I'm moving around.
Yeah.
It's just like GPS. So we tried to create something that was like indoor GPS. And so what we found is that when people looked at the data they were collecting and the SLAM was on and the SLAM was tracking them. So just in case anybody doesn't know, what SLAM does is it captures data all the time, LiDAR data, and it basically can be used to collect data, which we're not using it for, or it can be used to track the thing that is the LiDAR scanner itself through that space. And that's what we're using it for. But what we found is that when people saw the data and then they saw their camera or themselves moving in it, they went, oh, I get it. That's the living room. I'm in the living room. And look, I'm moving. Oh, now I'm going through the hallway. And so that really helped new users understand what they were looking at. So you and I, we're too good. We take for granted the fact that we can
Yeah.
just look at that data and go, oh, that's a map. But some people really struggle with that, and we didn't have a lot of strategies to deal with that other than SLAM and a few other techniques because it's such a challenging problem. But we recognize that, and so this is our next attempt at making that easier. So for an existing user who's really good, it's not much help. For a new user, it's great,
Yeah.
and for someone who struggles with it, it's great. But there's some weird side benefits by just using it. It doesn't hurt you to have it on. It doesn't cost anything. There's no cost at all. But for an experienced user, what it does is it gives you a little bit of safety because when you look at your data, you might see something missing and you might think, oh, I should get that. And as you walk through the property, it can help you wayfind your way there because it tracks you.
Hmm.
So it really
Okay.
gives you that sense that you're being tracked as you walk through the property, and it helps you navigate to spaces that you might not otherwise find immediately. So it can save you a little bit of time, which is nice.
Yeah. So kind of leads to another question I had about that. Um, for users who just needed a floor plan, didn't need any graphical data, is there a world in the future where we can use Slam and simply just walk around and capture it for data purposes, not just visually looking at the app, but capture it and then I was thinking about I did a 300,000 square foot warehouse recently,
Mhm.
and it's fine to go through. That's what I'm getting paid for, but to be able to just simply walk through as it's a Slam scanner would be a lot quicker.
Was that your feature request?
No, that wasn't it, but that,
Oh, we got another one?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
So, okay, I'll speak to that. And the answer is, yeah, technically that's possible, but there's lots of compromises. So a big part of what makes iGuide is that the accuracy. What
right,
we do is we require this very specific data so that we can make an output that helps you build your business through trust and accuracy. So right now, the perfect combo is that LiDAR data from a stationary position with the 360 also from a stationary position, so that you have the accurate measurements from the LiDAR
yeah,
combined with the image data and so on and so forth. So switching, if we could have done that, we would have done it already if it would have made sense. So right now it doesn't, but that doesn't mean we're not constantly trying to think of ways to obviously improve the speed and the capture process. But interestingly, there is a very clear way to do that. It doesn't change the processing. It doesn't change anything in terms of cost. It's still the same iGuide cost, but the capture cost is greatly reduced if you just decide that the output that you want is floor plans. One of the really interesting things about iGuide that I'm constantly telling everybody, I don't know if people listen to me anymore. I think I've got that old man thing where I just keep talking and people are just like, oh, here goes Chris again. But I'll say it anyway, just in case somebody's listening. iGuides and the technology used to create them were primarily made to measure a property first and create a floor plan. And then you kind of get like a virtual tour out of it. A lot
yeah,
of other systems are the reverse. They're meant to be these broad, comprehensive capture systems that either immediately create a visual experience or some sort of virtual tour.
right,
So because it's floor plans first, that means you can shoot totally differently, and I mentioned this earlier, and much, much faster if you just want floor plans, and then you can just not use the tour. It's just optional. So again, if the processing is identical in terms of cost, but capturing can vastly reduce your time on site. You can go from 40 scans to like 10, 15 easily. One
yeah,
scan per space, super minimal. And then it's just as fast as you can walk. I mean, it's obviously you have to place the camera, push a button and wait, but one scan per space, and then you're done, is significantly faster than how most people would capture a comprehensive virtual tour with like visual navigation. So that is an option right now. You can do it right now. Lots of people do it.
so okay, I'll save this next question I have for another date then.
Okay. All right.
Here's the feature request I had, particularly if you can use slam in the sense of mapping the property. um, can we get some sort of on screen, as we're going, total number of scanned square footage?
You know what? You're not even the first person to ask this today. That is so funny. So we actually have the ability to do this to a certain degree in different stages of the process. And one of the reasons we don't is because of real world experience. It's so funny. I've been asked during shoots so many times by agents or whoever I'm shooting for, hey, can you just tell me the square footage real quick? I just want to get this listing up. I'm like, no, 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 no. I, I don't have access to it, but even if I did, you wouldn't want it. Like the whole value proposition for iGuide measurements is that that square footage is accurate and like legally defensible and it follows like
Yeah,
standards and there's a rigorous drafting process where like a professional drafter with 20 years of experience is going to look it over and they're going to make that call. They're going to do the hard thing. They're going to say, oh, these little dots, those are a wall. And it's like I can't do that. I'm in the living room here. you
well,
know
here's where it
um
comes in. Here's where I think it would come in handy, at least to have some sort of approximate, and it could say there's a margin of error by
Yeah, well, yeah, to your
10%,
point, yeah.
5%, whatever it is. But um, in some industries, let's say a wedding venue
Yeah,
has an outdoor marriage ceremony location. It has an indoor reception. It has a place where the bride gets ready, where the groom gets ready. Um, it, we've been billing based on kind of the number of square feet,
yeah,
and they have buckets. So if you stay under,
yes.
let's say 5,000 square feet, it's this price. If you go 5,001 to 10,000, it's that price. So when we're on site scanning, a lot of times these venues might not have the square footage of their spaces already.
Yeah,
And so they're like, well, we'd like to capture this area, but we don't know if that's going to put us over the bucket.
yeah,
So it'd be helpful to say, okay, well, we've currently scanned 5,000 square feet. If we add this extra little area in the park or the venue, it's going to push you over into that next bucket. Do you really want to do it, or do you want to save that square footage allotment for somewhere else? So that's
Yeah.
where I think it would come in handy. Not so much residential,
Well,
but
I'll I'll
residential.
uh I'll teach you a trick borrowed from facility management. So we have a product that you may or may not be aware of called Radix.
Yeah,
So what Radix does is it allows you to scan, but then nothing is interpreted. It's totally touchless. No drafter looks at it. It's just like the data is there and you have the 360 visuals. And so what that means is that you can use that data and there's no processing, so it's done almost instantly. So what you could do is you could scan the whole property or areas, whatever areas you want. You can remotely submit them from your phone. Like Radix is really tiny. You can just submit it right then. And
yeah,
they only, I forget the processing fee. It's like $4.99 or something for like 75 scans. And you can keep adding to it. So you can use the same project and just keep adding as you go.
yeah.
And then you could just measure yourself. You could just load it up and just do a quick measurement on screen. Go, oh yeah, okay, 3,000 square feet. So the other option, but that's a little bit, so that would be, you could do that on site, not
Yeah.
instantaneously, but in maybe 10, 15 minutes. The other option is to submit the data that you have and look at the iGuide preview. So that's not going to help you if you're trying to make a decision about should I scan this or should I not scan this. But every iGuide has an AI preview built in if it's under a
Yeah,
certain
yeah,
size.
yeah,
And that allows you to go in and you can do the same thing. You can just look at the preview and you can just measure on top of it. But those are usually available in like 10 minutes or so.
yeah. I still think I like my feature requests.
Well, I can't
Just
keep you
because I've
here. Come
literally
on.
been on site. I was on site, beautiful property in Healdsburg, Napa
Yeah.
Valley area. And I said, "Do you want to capture this outdoor fire pit area?" And they said,
Yeah.
"Well, it's going to push us over the limit. So we want to keep it under that. So go right up to the walkway to it." Um,
Yeah, that's pretty common. I mean, that's yeah, I understand. That makes perfect sense.
yeah,
I think we're really cautious at iGuide because square footage information is like so important
yeah.
that we tend to err on the side of caution because it's often misinterpreted and miscommunicated. So I think we just see it as a potential.
It could include a video pop up of you going, "Wait, this is just a
That's right.
proxy pit.
Hold on.
This is
I'd be
not
okay with that.
to be considered accurate."
So we've
Uh,
been talking about the camera, but like I've never put it like on screen. Do people want to see it? Maybe.
yeah,
Do you
yeah,
want to
yeah.
see it?
Oh, you actually have a camera.
Yeah, of course. I got cameras everywhere, man. They're like up in the ceiling and
Yeah, yeah,
everything.
yeah.
I like shovel them under the rug when I'm going to do a call so no one sees it. But yeah, here's a new R1 camera.
Nice.
Quick bullet points. This thing is a big cover. I've never seen a camera ever have anything even remotely like this. It's a giant cover that covers all the lenses, the LiDAR lens, and the power button. Power
Yeah.
button's right there. And so for me personally, that's incredible. I can throw it in any bag I want. I don't have to worry anymore about like having a special case and like having it all in bespoke, perfectly cut foam, which was cool. But at the same time, it's like I've got a million camera bags that have like all my stuff in them. So it's nice to be able to just kind of plop this right in.
I just traveled out of state for a shoot, and that was a nightmare trying just my anxiety of packing the equipment I needed into
Yep.
a carry-on piece of luggage.
Yeah, this just takes
That would
that
have
and it
been
doesn't even matter. Put some socks on top of it, throw it in your carry-on, it's fine.
right.
It actually comes with a neoprene sleeve specifically for that,
Okay.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
But then here's the Ricoh Theta X, so 60 megapixels. It's really good.
Yep.
The image performance is better than what you would get out of just that camera alone because we do additional processing before it's obviously turned into an iGuide. So you have, just like any other iGuide camera, full editing controls. You can get in there and change clarity, contrast, white balance, exposure, all that stuff's kind of cool. But it automatically does it too,
Yeah.
which is great. This is a fun one. This has come up a couple times and it shocks people. This is the battery. It's inserted into the side, but when removed, you can see that it's what's very red.
Yeah.
But that's because it is a fairly common. Um, I don't know if that's going to be in focus. It's a
Yeah.
Milwaukee, or is it upside
Yeah.
down?
Yeah. Yeah.
Milwaukee M12 2.5 amp hour lithium battery with a door on it. So that means that in a pinch, you can go to pretty much any hardware store, and provided it's this very specific one,
Yeah.
we don't recommend that you use the 1.0, the 1.5, or the lower capacity ones. But if you want to, you can buy these. Milwaukee batteries are really good. So that's kind of a cool bonus. Other interesting
Can I ask you a
features.
question about the battery?
Sure, yeah,
Um,
of course.
the Planix Pro had a removable battery.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't remember seeing a charger for it that was available.
Ah, so one of the cool things about this camera is that it is essentially portless. Like it's not, there's nothing to damage here. So there's no barrel jack anymore. If you want to charge the battery, it's very much like you remove it, you put it into charger and you wait. And so there's benefits to that. There's downsides to that. One of the things that I really like about that is that the included charger is USB-C.
Nice.
So it doesn't sound like a big deal probably to some people, but to a big nerd like me, USB-C is my everything. Like everything's USB-C. So when I'm in the car, I don't have to worry anymore. No stupid power inverter. I can just plug it in. I have battery packs for days. Like it's just great. I'm just so happy about that.
Yeah.
Another interesting couple features is that the distance from the LiDAR to the base is quite small. That means that if you're doing something fairly exotic, like trying to measure the perimeter of a parapet wall on like a roof, pretty easy. You can just place the camera down and it'll do it.
Yeah.
And the bottom of the camera is relatively flat. It's got little
Nice.
feet, so you can still set it down. But
Yeah.
that means it's compatible with all sorts of weird stuff. Any tripod you can imagine. It'll work with like just weird like video QR plates, Manfrotto ones that are old, or like
Yeah.
any Arca Swiss thing, the Manfrotto RC2s with the little levers and stuff like that. That was always a kind of a thing with Planix Pro, was that it had those feet, and they didn't let you use any QR plate you wanted. But the
Nice.
interesting thing about this is it's compatible to all sorts of weird accessories. I don't know if you can see this,
Yeah, I
but
like
this
that.
is a QR plate with collapsible feet, and
Yeah.
it makes it look like a little spaceship, which I just love. And so it's just a Snarka Swiss compatible plate. Then it has little feet built in. How cool is
Well, you
that?
gotta let me.
So,
But I need the link for that one.
oh, I'll send it to you after this. So I'm writing a blog where I'm going to recommend my top accessories. So this camera was designed to be like very friendly with things in your everyday life as, real estate photographer, but anyone who goes out in the field and carries stuff. So that means it's just like super compatible with like things like this and cases. So for nerdy people like me, this is like Christmas because this means I can go and buy all sorts of weird stuff. And yeah, this is awesome. So this gives you extra, I don't know if you can see that, but you can just put it anywhere you want. If you really wanted to, you can also put a little leveler on here and you
Yeah.
can get the full thing.
No, so we do a lot with needing to capture floor drains in
Yep,
restaurants. So it'd be good to keep it low for that. Inside
100%.
airplanes or cars.
So I did a CNC machine,
Okay.
one of those big, this looks like a shipping
Yeah.
container kind of things. It's got those big drill bits in it
Yep.
and then the
Yep.
track. And so this is small enough that I was able to just put it in the machine in different locations. It was so cool. And, they're covered in oil and grease. So the little feet were very handy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought I got the camera, but, there's all the bits up the top on a big conveyor belt. And I was able to get it in there and I put it right on the
Nice.
machining area and I put it
Yeah.
on the roof of the device. So, you know,
What about
having it.
lighting?
So you can add more light. One of the interesting things about all cameras is that they always want more light, and so this one is very much like Planix Pro and not like IMS5, very stationary. So what that means is that if you're going to provide light, you need to do it comprehensively in a 360, or you just won't have. You'll have obviously areas that are lit in the yard,
Yeah.
but there are lots of options for things that will kind of give you full coverage. And again, this is residential real estate. No, because this creates weird shadows and looks horrible. But if
Sure.
you're doing AEC stuff and you need to light up a space, it can speed up the camera. And so that's a big deal. And
Yeah.
IMS5 was like that too. It would do like 10-second long exposures, and you're just like, oh my gosh, you're
Yeah.
checking
Yeah.
or not 10 seconds, sorry, a minute long exposures, and you'd be sitting there like waiting for the camera to finish, because there's no lights in the house. So with this, there's the 360 halo light that we've tried out. It's pretty fun. A lot of people are doing sort of tripod mounted arrays of like three lights between the legs, and any will do. It doesn't really matter. It kind of
Yeah.
depends on the
Yeah.
strength that you need and what kind of hassle you're willing to put up with in terms of batteries, because you can imagine it's an octopus if you have all the cables plugged
Right.
into stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of comprehensive solutions, usually people will just avoid the legs essentially of a tripod, and they'll put
Yeah.
three lights or use one circular light.
Can you add that to your blog? Lighting
So
recommendations?
so it's the last thing that I'm working on right now
Okay.
because I have some really cool stuff. This is one of them. I found a really cool leveler and some different. I'm not going to ruin it. You'd
No,
have
no,
to
no,
wait,
yeah, I don't want to
you
know the,
know.
all the secret, but I
I was
did
about to
a
tell you the whole thing. Yeah.
I did a burned out building recently, and
Yeah.
I had and I used a competitor. Don't judge me,
Okay.
but I had to put these little cube lights
Yeah.
all over it, to because there was no power in the building, and it
Yeah,
was
exactly. Yeah. There's no
yeah,
lights. So
yeah,
yeah, you can either wait forever for the light to come into the lens, or you can add light and kind of keep cooking.
yeah,
100%.
good stuff. So yeah, I think you pretty much hit all my talking points that I had. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.
Um, I don't think I have anything else.
Okay, well, I'll summarize this thing.
Yeah,
Okay. It was designed to make the capture process better, and then obviously the resulting iGuide better as well. But this was made very specifically for people who want to, have something that is well durable and that will last
right.
a very long time, but that gets results in almost any condition, and that is easy to use. And I forget the phrase, but the camera you use is the one you have with you. Is that what it is? I think I'm not messing that up.
Yeah,
And so this is designed to be that. You just always have it. You don't have to worry about it. It's not like a special rolly case or whatever. You just throw it in your bag. You take it wherever you need to go. And to be, like a camera, obviously, but also more like a measurement tool. And to help, obviously, become, I mentioned this before, sort of transparent in the process of measuring, not something that gets in your way, something that helps you move as quickly as you can through a property, to get your accurate measurements, your floor plans, and then create a 3D tour if you want, um, without too much hassle to buy you lots of extra time to do whatever else it is that you need.
yeah. And again, not to I don't know, not to murky the water here, but I did a shoot recently with a competitor system, and I left a critical piece of the system at home, which was 2 hours away from where I
Oh,
was,
yeah.
and I couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
I had my camera gear, I had my Arca Swiss mounts, I had
Yeah.
everything else, but this one little piece I needed to get this other camera system to work, and so I had to wait for somebody to bring it to me, and that was time consuming and just unprofessional, and stuff happens, but I don't like it to happen to me. So having the ability to just use any type of tripod mount is huge,
It's yes. Yeah.
because I
It's
have a bunch of those laying around my car, like they're just everywhere.
yeah.
But I don't have the critical components for some of these other systems just
Yeah.
randomly laying around. So kudos to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So cool.
Cool.
Well, thank you for your time.
No worries.
Greatly appreciate the chat. I'm gonna end our recording. Let's see if I can do this without hanging up on you. Or is this it? Maybe no. It changed it. Stop.